Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Abraham Lincoln, Part 2, Ambitious Young Man. We stopped last time in 1832, and Abraham Lincoln had political aspirations, and that year he made his first public political statement. He expressed his hope that, quote, every man may receive at least a moderate education, and thereby be enabled to read the histories of his own and other countries, by which he may duly appreciate the value of our free institutions. William C. Davis wrote, quote, Abraham Lincoln advocated the reading of history as a means of instilling patriotism. That's actually one of the reasons why I've been making these videos on American presidents. So in 1832, Abraham Lincoln was a candidate for the state legislature in Illinois. He was very interested in promoting infrastructure, measures to improve the roads, rivers, and canals to help connect Illinois, which was at the time considered a western state and far from the more advanced or materially improved places. And he wanted to make the Sangamon River more navigable. This town he lived in, New Salem, was on the Sangamon, and it needed to be deepened and widened for shipping. So he was hoping that New Salem would be connected to the rest of the country better. Abraham Lincoln said in the campaign, quote, every man is said to have his peculiar ambition. Whether it be true or not, I can say, for one, that I have no other so great as that of being truly esteemed of by my fellow men, by rendering myself worthy of their esteem. How far I shall succeed in gratifying this ambition is yet to be developed. I am young and unknown to many of you. I was born and have remained in the most humble walks of life. I have no wealthy or popular relations to recommend. My case is thrown exclusively upon the independent voters of this county, and if elected, they will have conferred a favor upon me, for which I shall be unremitting in my labors to compensate. But if the good people in their wisdom shall see fit to keep me in the background, I have been too familiar with disappointment to be very much chagrined. So he wanted to be respected by his ambition to be respected. Now, this store, the Offutt's store in New Salem, where Abraham Lincoln was working, failed in the spring of 1832. He was out of work. And then with William Berry, he bought half of a New Salem store from Rowan Herndon. Eventually, that store failed as well. And Abraham Lincoln spent a lot of time in these stores in New Salem talking politics with customers. On April 21st, 1832, excuse me, Abraham Lincoln volunteered for service in the Illinois militia to serve in the Black Hawk War against the Sauk and Fox Indians, American Indians. He became a captain, and his company marched north. However, he saw no action. There was no fighting that he was personally involved in. He was paid $125 for his service, and it was only a 30-day enlistment. He was elected captain by the other volunteers, which surprised him and also very much thrilled him. A friend said, quote, he prized it and the distinction it gave him more than any which in after years fell to his lot. So he was very happy about this being elected captain, that these guys respected him. It was the first time Abraham Lincoln had been elected to anything. He was in a 68-man company. Biographer William C. Davis wrote, quote, as Abraham Lincoln quickly learned, keeping the esteem of the volunteers even more than discipline was paramount, for they would only follow and obey a man they respected. Instinctively he knew that good humor, patience, and a willingness to share equally in the hardships of the privates and an absence of self-importance were the best means to bind the men to him. Fortunately, they were already traits in his nature. William C. Davis wrote, quote, certainly he shared in their privations, especially hunger. The military supply system worked imperfectly at best, and the soldiers often went without rations. When his men went hungry, so did he, on one occasion passing 2 whole days 2 days without food. Abraham Lincoln later recalled, quote, we once charged upon a field of wild onions when there was nothing else to eat. Now, there were lots of times in camp, empty hours, and he enjoyed wrestling. Lincoln was very strong physically, and wrestling was popular, so he enjoyed wrestling other men, and he was a good wrestler because of his physical strength. William C. Davis wrote, quote, already Abraham Lincoln displayed well-honed talents as a storyteller, a popular commodity on long evenings in camp. Now, one thing that happened, an old Indian, a follower of Black Hawk, wandered into the camp seeking food. And this Sangamon County company had seen no action, and some wanted to kill this old American Indian. And Lincoln intervened and saved his life, because it would have been murder. William C. Davis wrote, quote, the episode taught Lincoln the necessity of making an example of standing for the right, for even men in the wrong respected that. Now, there was one incident during the Black Hawk War. Several men under Abraham Lincoln's command stole whiskey from the officers' quarters and got drunk, and they could not march in the morning. And Lincoln was the officer. As their officer, was responsible and punished for this. And his punishment was to carry a wooden sword for 2 days. Now, during his time in the Black Hawk War, he drilled the men in marching. At one point, they were marching 20 abreast and came to a fence and a gate. And Lincoln said, quote, I could not for the life of me remember the proper word for getting my company endwise so that it could get through the gate. So as we came near the gate, I shouted, this company is dismissed for 2 minutes, when it will fall in again on the other side of the gate. On May 27th, his 30-day enlistment expired, and he enlisted for 20 days more as a private in a new company. On June 16th, he enlisted for 30 more days in another company. On June 25th, Lincoln and other soldiers, found the dead bodies of American soldiers who had been killed and scalped, 5 Americans dead. And Lincoln remembered, quote, every man had a round red spot on top of his head as big as $1. It was frightful and grotesque. Abraham Lincoln was very proud of his brief military service. In 1850, he received 40 acres of land in Iowa as compensation and reward for his service. He never set foot on that land, never saw it, and never sold it, because this was a reminder of his military service that he was very proud of. So he continued campaigning for the legislature after getting out of the service, his brief military service. And during that time, he was spinning yarns in country stores, pitching horseshoes with voters, giving speeches on top of boxes and tree stumps. He became received the position of postmaster for New Salem, and which meant he could read all the newspapers which arrived at Sam Hill's General Store, where the post office was located. On August 6th, the election was held for the Illinois State Legislature. There were 4 openings for new fellows to be elected. There were 13 candidates. Lincoln finished 8th out of the 13, so he lost that election. During this time, he joined the New Salem Debating Society, which was popular, having debates where the public would enjoy listening to 2 sides of a topic. Some of those topics included were, quote, should society care for the poor, education for women, public money for canals and roads, slavery, right or wrong. And Lincoln was enthusiastic. He had integrity, but it took him time to develop his public speaking skills. During this time, he walked 6 miles to borrow the book English Grammar by Samuel Kirkham from a farmer by the name of John C. Vance. So it shows his dedication to learning. So by 1833, Lincoln and William Berry were the co-owners of a general store in New Salem, Illinois. They sold... Things they sold included tea, coffee, sugar, salt, blue calico, brown muslin, men's and women's hats and shoes. There was not a lot of business, which gave Lincoln time to read books in the newspapers. He was moved by poetry. He was very interested in poetry, and he was memorizing Shakespeare. Eventually, that store failed, and New Salem, Illinois, was not growing. May 7th, he received that appointment as postmaster of New Salem, a salary of $25 to $30 a year, not full-time. He was helping at the store, Ellis' store. He did different things, helping farmers at harvesting. And he liked to read newspapers out loud in the post office. And he was learning about American politics, what was going on. The National Intelligencer was a favorite newspaper of Lincoln. He also worked as a surveyor, surveying towns and farms and also public schools. There were many settlers arriving in Illinois, so there was a great need for surveying. Illinois was really growing during this time. In 1834, Lincoln tried again and was successful, was elected to the Illinois legislature. He finished second out of 13 candidates. Ronald C. White, one of his biographers, wrote regarding Lincoln, quote, "He was known for his clear-headed thinking, whimsical storytelling, and self-deprecating humor." November 28th, Abraham Lincoln traveled to Vandalia, Illinois, the state capital, to begin his political career as an Illinois legislator. He borrowed $200 to buy decent clothes. This was the first suit of clothes that he had ever owned. And he shared a room with John Todd Stewart, a Whig leader from Springfield, Illinois, in Vandalia, the state capital of Illinois at the time. Coleman Smoot, a friend of Abraham Lincoln, said, quote, "Not only did his wit, kindliness, and knowledge attract people, but his strange clothes and uncouth awkwardness advertised him, the shortness of his trousers causing particular remark and amusement." Yeah, he did tend to be kind of awkward physically, and his clothing was, he didn't spend much time trying to be dressed very well, and people found that amusing. James Matheny, another a friend of Lincoln, regarding the idea of Abraham Lincoln running for office, that he said at first it was, quote, "regarded as a joke. The boys wanted some fun. He was so uncouth and illy dressed that his candidacy offered a pleasant diversion for them." On December 1st, Abraham Lincoln had his first day in the Illinois legislature. He was 25 years old. He was also studying to be a lawyer, self-study, no law, did not go to law school, just borrowed law books, and so that was his plan. He was a politician, and he also wanted to become a lawyer to make a living. Now, this session that he was involved in, his first Illinois congressional session, lasted from December 1st, 1834, to February 3rd, 1835, so just about 2 months during the winter. 1835, Lincoln's former store partner William Berry died, and Lincoln assumed Berry's debt and his own. It was $1,100. Now, at that time, the country was in flux. Some people fled their debts. However, he earned the nickname Honest Abe based on how he handled that debt. Ronald C. White, Jr. wrote, quote, "Yes, Abraham Lincoln wanted to become a self-made man, but he was learning that his reputation depended on the opinion of others. His venture with the Lincoln Berry store may have failed, but his decision to stay and repay his neighbors raised his esteem among a growing circle of friends." So he paid that debt off, his own and that of his deceased partner. 1835, he started studying law under lawyer John Todd Stewart in New Salem. And Lincoln bought Sir William Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England, a standard legal treatise of the day, at an auction. And he often enjoyed doing his legal studies outdoors. So he was a politician and an aspiring lawyer. That $1,100 debt Lincoln paid off. It took him 15 years. And again, this really helped with his reputation that he was an honest man, and he was very honest. He became a self-taught lawyer. As I said, he was seen walking down the road reading aloud from law books as he was attempting to learn the law. By 1836, Lincoln received his law license. In 1835, the year before, he was engaged to marry Anne Rutledge, a local gal. Now, Anne died of typhoid fever on August 25th, so the marriage didn't push through. Ronald C. White wrote, quote, Abraham Lincoln was devastated by Anne's death. He had lost his mother and his sister to early deaths, and now he had lost the first woman he had loved. Robert Rutledge, probably I imagine the brother of Anne, said, quote, the effect on Mr. Lincoln's mind was terrible. He became plunged in despair, and many of his friends feared that reason would desert her throne. There was a story that Abraham Lincoln was found on a dark, stormy night by Anne Rutledge's newly made grave, and he remarked, quote, I cannot bear to have the rain fall upon her. 1836, the Illinois legislature voted to move the Illinois state capital, which was in Vandalia, to Springfield, Illinois. And there was a celebration in Vandalia at the Caps Tavern. There was free champagne, cigars, oysters, almonds, and raisins at that celebration. On March 19, 1836, Abraham Lincoln declared his candidacy for a second term in the Illinois legislature. On August 1st, Lincoln received the highest number of votes among the 17 candidates in the field during that election for the Illinois legislature. December of 1836, Lincoln was 27 years old. He returned to Vandalia, which continued to be the capital until Springfield was ready, and he was elected floor leader by the Whigs. Stephen A. Douglas was a new member of the legislature, one of his colleagues, and a Democrat. And of course, they had a long history together in the coming years. Again, he was admitted to the Illinois bar, which meant he could start that year, so he could start practicing law. In 1837, in Alton, Illinois, abolitionist editor Elijah Lovejoy was shot and killed by a mob, and his press was dumped into the Mississippi River. So this was part of the growing conflict over slavery. The abolitionists, of course, were advocating the end of slavery. January of 1837, the Illinois legislature passed a $10 million bill for Illinois regarding internal improvements, canals, roads, and railroad, to help the state to develop economically, which Abraham Lincoln supported in a big way. However, the timing was not very good. There was a lot of land speculation, which led to the 1837 financial panic. And Illinois was in economic trouble and had a big debt that they couldn't pay. In February of 1837, the Illinois state capital moved to Springfield. And of course, the slavery debate was ongoing. That same year, New Salem was dying. The Sangamon, all this infrastructure did not go forward when the economic crisis came. The Sangamon River was unnavigable. They had lost their post office in 1836. On April 15th of 1837, Abraham Lincoln moved to Springfield, Illinois, and this became his home for the rest of his life, except for the presidency, where he practiced law and served in the state legislature. At first, he shared a room with Joshua Speed. He was a young lawyer with a new license, and he became a partner with John Todd Stewart. 3 years later, New Salem was a ghost town in 1840, so that was the end of the story for New Salem. Back to 1837, David S. Reynolds wrote about Springfield in 1837, quote, hogs roved about, foraging on the garbage tossed on the streets, and digging holes to wallow in. Now, the Springfield barber, or at least one of them, was a free black, a Haitian immigrant from Haiti named William de Flourville, and he was this man that Lincoln had met years previously on his way to Springfield, and he became William de Flourville became Abraham Lincoln's barber for the next 24 years, and also a friend. There was a and de Flourville had a newspaper advertisement regarding his barbershop that read, quote, emperor and autocrat of all the barbers of Sangamo, making known to all my subjects that I continue to nullify beards at my tonsorial palace. Quite an advertisement. 1837, Abraham Lincoln traveled the new 8th Judicial Court in Illinois, arguing legal cases. This was the traveling court. The lawyers and the judge would travel to hear cases in various small towns. They could not support a court year-round. He was on horseback, muddy roads, crossing swollen streams, rough accommodations in hotels, 2 or 3 men sharing a bed. He often slept on the floor as he proceeded with this traveling court. And Abraham Lincoln shone in court. He did well, and also at night in the local hotel or tavern with an, quote, inexhaustible fund of stories and anecdotes. He became known for his laughter. People liked Abraham Lincoln. He had a lot of good stories. He was a funny guy, and he entertained people. And also, as he traveled, he was making a name for himself that later translated into votes. People were meeting him. He was meeting voters. He made friends with farmers, merchants, and other lawyers. 1837, Lincoln was again interested in courting. He met a young woman named Mary Owens, with whom he became involved, and they were romantically involved. And he wrote a letter to Mary at that year, and a part of the letter wrote, quote, "Whatever woman may cast her lot with mine, should any ever do so, it is my intention to do all in my power to make her happy and contented. What I wish is that our further acquaintance shall depend on yourself. If you feel yourself in any degree bound to me, I am now willing to release you, provided you wish it, while on the other hand I am willing and even anxious to bind you faster if I can be convinced that it will be in any considerable degree add to your happiness. If it suits you best to not answer this farewell, a long life, and a merry one attend you." Now, this Mary Owens apparently was not impressed by that letter, and she did not respond, and that was the end of Abraham Lincoln's relationship with Mary Owens. January of 1838, Ronald C. White, Jr. wrote, quote, "In Abraham Lincoln's constant drive for self-improvement, he sought out opportunities to enhance his speaking ability. Lincoln gave a speech at the Young Men's Lyceum in Springfield, and he said, quote, 'If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide.'" So he was kind of alluding to the growing issue of slavery that was really leading to severe conflict in the country. 1838, Ronald C. White wrote, quote, "At age 29, Abraham Lincoln was living proof that in Illinois a young man could begin with nothing, and through hard work rise to statewide influence." 1839, finally, the capital of Illinois did move from Vandalia to Springfield. Springfield was prepared for that. Also in 1839, Mary Todd was a woman who was born in 1818 in Lexington, Kentucky, in a wealthy family. She was part of one of Kentucky's leading political families. She came to visit Springfield. Henry Clay was one of their neighbors. Now Mary Todd was her. Of course, Lincoln eventually married her, and he met her at that time. Her mother had died at age 6, giving birth to her 7th child, and then her stepmother had 9 children. So she was one of 15 children. He was very intelligent and interested in politics, a very passionate Whig. In 1832, at age 14, she supported Henry Clay for the presidency against Andrew Jackson. Their family owned slaves. She was very pretty, 5'2", strong-willed and determined. She liked to talk. She had a temper. And she was visiting family members in Springfield that year. And Mary was a young woman, and she attracted many suitors. She was very lively, had a very outgoing personality. And she became friends with Stephen Douglas. Ronald C. White wrote, quote, "Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd both prized education and had worked hard to achieve it. In Mary, Abraham Lincoln recognized a soulmate in intellectual curiosity and learning. Lincoln's courtship of Mary was a romance of the mind as well as the heart. Their mutual enjoyment of ideas and politics put Abraham at ease. They both loved poetry, especially that of Robert Burns, and enjoyed reading aloud to each other. 1840 was a presidential election year, and Abraham Lincoln was active in the campaign. He was a member of the Whig Party, and he actively campaigned for William Henry Harrison, who won the election that year. And Lincoln gave many speeches in support of Harrison, General Harrison. And Abraham Lincoln was becoming an important Whig politician in Illinois. Ronald C. White Jr. wrote about Abraham Lincoln in 1840, quote, "Even after living for 5 years in Springfield, Abraham Lincoln did not join societies, organizations, or churches. He enjoyed his time alone when he could read without interruption. Although comfortable in political meetings, he remained uncomfortable in ordinary social gatherings." Now, Lincoln's religious beliefs regarding Christianity, Lincoln wrote, quote, at one point wrote, quote, "But for the Bible, we could not know right from wrong." Isaac Cogdill wrote, quote, "Abraham Lincoln did not believe in hell or eternal punishment." William C. Herndon wrote, quote, his eventual law partner, quote, "Abraham Lincoln could not believe that God created a world and that the result of it would be eternal damnation." Another quote by Lincoln about Christianity, quote, "The Bible is the best gift God has given to man. All the good that the Savior gave to the world was communicated through this book. All the things most desirable for man's welfare here and hereafter are to be found in it." See, Abraham Lincoln never joined a church, but you can see he did believe in Christianity and the teachings of Jesus Christ. Biographer David Herbert Donald wrote, quote, "Abraham Lincoln learned that his wit was most effective when directed against himself." So that was his self-deprecating humor, which was the only person hurt would be himself. So this courtship with Mary Todd was going on, and then eventually in 1840 they had an agreement that they might marry, and Mary said that they were lovers at that time. 1841, the engagement was broken. Things happen, and Lincoln was depressed. His friend Joshua Speed was moving back to the family home in Kentucky, so he was feeling sad about that. And before Joshua Speed left, Lincoln said to him, quote, "I shall be very lonesome without you. How miserably things seem arranged in this world. If we have no friends, we have no pleasure. And if we have them, we are sure to lose them and be doubly pained by the loss." Yeah, Lincoln did struggle with depression on and off his whole life, and especially during this time when the engagement with Mary Todd was called off. And he wrote in the 1841, quote, "I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would not be one cheerful face on earth. Whether I shall ever be better, I cannot tell. I awfully forebode I shall not. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die or be better, it appears to me." So he did recover from his depression, but it came back. He struggled with it on and off. In 1841, his new law partner was Stephen T. Logan. And the story about Logan was that he was a compulsive whittler, enjoyed whittling, where you have a stick or a piece of wood that you enjoy shaving pieces off with a knife. And the story is that the sheriff provided him, this Stephen Logan, with white plank shingles and a wood sack in court, and Lincoln and Logan whittled in court. Well, that concludes today's presentation. We'll continue next time with part 3 of the amazing life of Abraham Lincoln. I hope you find a good history book to read, or because there's so many wonderful history books out there to read. You might consider checking out our website, Adventures in History with Peter J. Ray, at peterjray.com. So far, we've made 716 history videos in 7 areas: world history, American history, book reviews, poetic tours, Cleveland baseball, family history, and autobiography. There's a donate feature. You might consider making a donation so we can continue making these videos. If you live in Metro Manila, Philippines, and are looking for a high school, you might consider Receleste Educational Center. Receleste is located on Allenby Street in San Juan, Metro Manila, Philippines. At Receleste, we specialize in helping young people who have had difficulty in the larger traditional high schools. We're more than a school. We are a warm, supportive community, and we strive to be creative and innovative. And the website is receleste.education, RESALEST. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.